This is the second part of a series of tutorials on the Logic Drummer and how to get the Logic Drummer on your tracks to make your tracks sound really great, as if they've got a real live drummer on, without having to pay for studio time, without having to hire a drummer or get somebody on or learning to play the drums or having to spend ages and ages programming. This is how to use this Logic Drummer track to make your track sound really good. In the first part, which if you've missed, it hopefully should be in the description down the bottom, but in the first part I give you a brief overview as to what the Logic Drummer track is and why it's so useful. I also showed you how to arrange and how to use the editor down the bottom here. You can press E to get this up, to get each individual section of your drums sounding bespoke and as good as possible. So after that first bit, here's one I made earlier. I've kind of mapped out the drum arrangement for this track. This is one of my library music tracks for advert and TV, some of my southern rock kind of stuff. So I've got this drum track up here, and using the tricks and tips that I showed you in the first video, I've actually got an arrangement of my drums up the top here. So things that are on the go here at the moment, I've got the drums, the snare, the hats. I've set the simplicity, I've set it loud but kind of simple. There's a little bit of swing on there, there's a little bit of fills, and what I've done is I've put the claps on there, and the claps come in every time the snare hits, so it just adds a little bit of extra crack to that snare. Later on here, I've got a section where it goes to toms and then comes back to the kit. So I've got this whole arrangement. The only problem is if I put this back in with my main mix, you'll see that it just gets completely swamped and lost. You can't really hear it that well, and it doesn't really come through that much. And that's mainly due to our mixing, because at the moment our drums are on a stereo channel, and mixing your drums on a stereo channel is no way to get big sounding drums. Whenever you do a drum recording session, you mic up all your drums individually, and you've got your overheads, and you might even have room mics in there as well. So you could have like 10 or 12 mics on your kit, but on this channel I've literally got 2 channels, so it's not going to sound very good and not going to sound very punchy. So the first way we fix that is by doing something that some people, it's maybe passed you by if you've been using this drummer track. If you press Y again, remember the first video, pressed Y and it showed us all the different types of drummer we could have up here, and it showed us the drum kits. If you go to drum kits, they've got all the drum kits here. If you go down the bottom, you'll see another sub menu called producer kits. Now if you click producer kits, you'll notice loads of the same drum kits come up here, except this time they've got a plus next to them. And what that means is if I click SoCal plus instead of SoCal, it loads up the exact same drum kit that we had before, apart from this time if we go into the mixer by pressing X, you'll notice there's a little arrow above where it says SoCal where there wasn't before. Now if I press this arrow, you'll see shows me my entire drum kit now. I can actually mix the entire drum kit individually. And this is where we're in business. This is where we're going to get these drums sounding loads better than they were doing at the start, and getting them popping and sounding as good as they can do in this mix. So we've got our multiple output here, which is fantastic. The first thing we need to do, and I'm going to do a few shortcuts here, is I'm going to put some compression on these individual drums. because one of the first things that you want to do when you're mixing your drums is add compression on each part of the drum kit. Compression just brings just squeezes the volume range of any particular channel, and it's just a lot easier to get your track sounding balanced and well mixed by using compression. I'm going to use some shortcuts here and use some default settings. If compression is something that you don't know loads about, I really suggest you look up some videos on what compression is and how to use it in your tracks and what the different parameters are in compressors. But for today's tutorial, to get us up and going, we're going to be using some presets to make sure this video doesn't take forever. So on our SoCal kit, we're going to start off with our overheads, and some of the channels come preset with a plugin already applied. So the overheads we're going to stick on in the preset list. In drums, we're just going to stick on tight kit, which is a nice overhead setting. Next on our kick, we're going to be putting on Type R kick drum. We're actually going to be doing the same on our kick out one as well. And what you can do is if you press Command and Option, you can actually drag that across, and it drags it across with exactly the same settings, which is quite good if you want to be putting multiple effects on different channels. Next is our snare. Just going to stick on VCA snare. We're going to copy that snare compressor on top of that one. So we've got VCA snare there. Hi-hats, there is no particular setting for hi-hats. If you're looking for a really easy one, let's get the compressor on there again. If you're looking for an easy compression setting for hi-hats, you can just choose the tight kit again. The overhead settings are perfectly fine for kind of rough mixing. We've got a toms here. Some nice default settings for toms. And we're actually going to copy that toms one onto the other two channels. The room mics, again, for nice, easy drums, we're going to choose drum room. And there's quite a cool setting in our drum kit here called leak. And what that is it emulates the leak between different mics on the kit. So I'm actually going to add that room setting to the leak channel as well. If I press play, this will sound better than it did before. Although you'll notice that now there's loads of them are clipping, so let's just draw a little bit of a box around them. And this is a great way of turning down multiple channels all at once. If you kind of drag a box around all of your channels there, and if I drag them down, it drags them down relative in volume to one another. So all it does is just turn my overall mix down. So if I press play again now, hopefully they're a little bit more balanced. And that's already sounding a load better than it did before, just with some proper compression and mixed on multiple outputs down here. Let's go back into drum kit actually. So since we've farmed it out to multiple outputs, you'll notice that our drum kit no longer comes up on our main channel here, SoCal. There's no ability to edit the drum kit. If we do click on this little arrow here, you'll notice the drum kit is actually above our overheads channel right on the top, the actual setting for our drums. If I double click on that, it brings up our drum kit. Now we looked at this in the first video, but we didn't really go into much detail because there is a lot more options when you're in multiple output. So if I click on my snare, there are loads and loads of different snares all down the left hand side. My logic's glitching a little bit, but if you click on one, you can actually press play and it'll load up this snare drum instead of that one. And you can go through, you can try and find like the snare that you would like on your track. And the same with, I ended up going with the black brass one when I was mixing it before. Same with the other parts of your kit. So you can go for your kick drum here, and there's a few different options. There's studio ones, there's kind of vintage ones. And you can go through loads of different ones. I think I had the Studio Deep one on before. You can do your toms, you can choose different toms, you can even choose your cymbals. So say your ride cymbal, there's loads of different types of ride cymbals that you can get on there. So you can get a real bespoke sounding kit. And on any part of the kit as well, so say I clicked on my snare, on the right hand side I can actually tune it up or down. Or I can dampen it, or I can add a little bit of gain to give it a little bit of bite. And underneath I can turn the leak between microphones on and off. I can turn how much it's getting picked up on the overheads and the room mics on and off as well. And there's 2 different types of rooms. So between them all, you can choose a real bespoke setting for your kit and get it sounding as good as it possibly can do. We've got our drums farmed out. We're really happy with our drum kit. We're really happy with our compression settings, and we've mixed it. So let's put this back in with the track. At the moment, it's still not sounding quite as good as it did in that first example I showed you in the first video. And a really good way of getting your drums popping even more, especially if you're going for rock kind of stuff, and this is kind of getting into mixing tips for drums, is you can actually add, just before your compressor, a little bit of overdrive. And what overdrive does is it slightly dirties up the signal. And if we choose it as our overheads here, and there's 3 settings here. The first one that you need to do something with at the bottom is this tone dial here. It says 980 Hertz. If we crank that right up to 20,000 Hertz, basically it's a roll off on our top end. And if we don't want our drums to sound muffled, we need to crank that right up to the top. Secondly is the output here, which you want to just leave at 0 dB. Thirdly is drive, and drive is how much grit that we're going to add to it. And what you can do is you can set your overdrive. I like to set it somewhere between 2-3 dB, so I'm going to set it to 2.5, and it just adds like a little bit of bite to our overheads. I'll show you what I mean. This is what it sounds like before, and this is what it sounds like with it on. And if I do that for my snare as well, we're just going to copy that over as a plugin. In fact, I'm going to turn all the rest of this mix down because it's getting quite loud compared to a drums. So that's sounding pretty good. The last little technique I'll show you in order to make our drums sound bigger than they are, especially with rock kind of stuff, is if you go to your main drum channel here, and if you go on sends on the actual main output here, and you click on a random bus that you're not using, so I'm going to click bus 5 here. What it does is it invents a channel down here. So bus 5, here we are, B5. And this is a spare channel that's duplicating our drum mix here. So you can see as I turned up that bus channel, it started to come through here. And what you can do on this channel, there's a really nifty little tip. If you get a compressor, and there's some settings down the bottom here built in for this kind of trick. But if you go to compressor tools, oh sorry, in yeah, compressor tools. And if you go down to smashed, down the bottom here, VCA smashed, what it is this is ridiculously compressed. This is huge compression here to really saturate your drums and make them sounding over compressed. Let's just have a listen to it on its own. It sounds massive, that, and it doesn't sound fantastic on its own. It just sounds a bit too compressed. But if we kind of mix it in really subtly with our main drums, you can actually get quite a good sounding drums down here. You could also do the overdrive trick with this smashed one as well if you want. If you want to go really gritty and really dirty. Let's try that out. And then later on as well, I didn't know if I showed it to you before, but I've got these toms on the go, so you can actually get some real interesting sounding drums in different sections. So in the second video, that's what I wanted to look at really. So in the second video, just to recap, we looked at farming out our drums onto multiple outputs in Logic down here. We looked at being able to change the different parts of our drum kit by double clicking the drums and actually choosing the different parts of our drums. We looked at adding compression and maybe a little bit of overdrive to some of our mix here. And we also looked at sending out our main drum channel, sending out on a bus channel and absolutely smashing that on a compressor and getting it sounding really gritty. In the last video, what we're going to look at is some of the extra layers that you can put onto your drums to make them sound even more powerful and interesting than they were sounding before. So thanks for listening and see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.